I'm Jake Bruton, and today on the Build Show, I want to talk about the scariest thing you can do as a builder. Let's do it now. So that's a clickbait title, the scariest thing you can do as a builder. But I want to tell you that for the beginning of my career, maybe even as much as the first 7 years, the scariest thing that I could do as a builder was a budget review with clients. And some of you probably just went, yeah, I agree. And some of you are dumbfounded by that idea. So if you're dumbfounded by that idea, maybe this video isn't for you. Maybe this video is for everybody else that went, man, dang, that you're right. Budget reviews are scary. So why were they scary for me? For starters, I sucked. That's why. I mean, plain and simple, I didn't understand the costs associated with my business, the costs associated with doing your job, executing your project, and I didn't understand how to know where we were in the budget, how much we had left, how much we had spent, because I wasn't in command of the numbers. So that's where our conversation starts. This shouldn't be a scary thing. Actually, let me back up. It shouldn't be a scary thing. And any conversation that you're gonna have with anybody in your life, your wife, your kids, your coworker, whatever it is, if it is a scary conversation, number one, I would recommend that you try to find a way to operate in that relationship moving forward so as no scary conversations come up. But number two, I would find a way to make sure that when a scary conversation comes up, that conversation is had at the earliest convenience. And I realize that that's more than business advice, that's personal advice, and you didn't come here for personal advice. But in my experience, the longer you wait to talk about anything, the worse it's going to get if it's an issue. So the same thing applies to budget conversations. If you're going to have a budget conversation with a client and you're over budget and you know it, there's a potential to be more over budget in the future. Then if you're not all the way through the job, you still have part of the job left, say you're 50% in and you know you're 10% over budget. Well, that last 50%, you could potentially still be 10% at the end, or you could potentially then be another 10%. And waiting till the end to have that conversation puts you potentially more over budget, which is going to be more of a problem. It's better to have the conversation as soon as possible, to participate in an open dialogue with your clients, and to make sure that your frequency and that your readiness to have that conversation happens quickly to manage expectations. So in other words, do it as soon as you know. As soon as you know you're over budget, that's the day that you should have the conversation, or the next day is the day you should have the conversation. As soon as possible, you should gather the information needed to feel confident in having that conversation. So don't wait. And if you're scared of this process, if you're scared of the budget conversation, then something with your process needs to change. And if you don't know, then you have to change something. And if your clients don't know what's going on, you have to take it upon yourself to change something. Pure and simple. It's that easy. So that's like my starting point. That's the first conversation that I would have. The first rule of budget reviews would be initial budget. Initial budget is absolutely key to the build process being on budget, you being in command of the budget. Let's take for instance, clients that you've worked with a lot. They say, we want to do a kitchen remodel, and you respond with, this is going to be a $50,000 kitchen remodel. And they go, okay, let's do it. And that's your contract. If you don't know what goes into that 50 grand and it truly was just a ballpark, then how could you possibly know whether or not you're over budget? How could you possibly know if it really was just a guess and you didn't put anything down on paper or you didn't take the time to really mentally be in charge of it? How would you know if one of the things that they picked is going to put them over budget? How would you know the amount of time you have allocated to that? On the flip side, if you said this is going to be a $50,000 kitchen, appliances are $8,800, our framing is this much, and you had all those numbers, you had them on paper, you had them in the contract. When the bills come in, invoice for the appliances is $9,000. Well, you know you're over budget, and you know exactly how much you're over budget because you had that number in writing. So I know those are extreme examples, the ballpark off the hip with no contract and the we're going to have every single penny accounted for. Those are two separate things, but we really should be operating closer to the every penny's accounted for so that you can be informed, so that you can make sure that the clients can be informed. I also kind of, I guess, skipped over it in the very beginning. The budget review is the first way that you're going to piss a client off or keep a client. If you don't do a budget review and you're over budget in the end, then they're going to wonder why, and they're probably going to be pissed. If you're doing budget reviews, even if you end up over budget, if you're explaining to them clearly as to why you're over budget, then chances of them still being happy in the end are way better than if you just said, oh, by the way, here's your final invoice and the over budget invoice that has X dollars attached to it. If they know, they can plan, they can be informed, all those sorts of things. So initial budget is key. I would also say find a way to be paid for your proposals. That way you can put more time into them. Even with us, our proposals are part of our pre-construction services agreement. And so therefore I get paid to do estimates, in other words. Being paid to do those estimates gives me the ability to say, hey, HVAC man, electrician, plumber man, can you guys all come and look at this project with me during the design phase so that we can get an accurate budget number in the budget for you? And while I'm not paying my HVAC guy for it, he knows that I'm being paid to put this together, so he knows I'm invested in the project and I'm only asking him to participate in things that I think are going to turn into real work for the two of us. I'm not having him chase down work for me. I'm not having him chase down a rabbit hole on the promise of at some point there being something that we could both be profitable over. So that's certainly one way that you should think about it. Get paid for it and you can put more effort into it. It's way easier to justify spending time on something if it's not a loss, if that makes sense. My number 2 rule, number 1's initial budget. Number 2 is reviewing the budget. So how often do you need to do a budget review? The majority of our projects we shoot for, and I say that purposely, shoot for every other week, basically. Or what it turns out to be is right after invoices come in the first of the month, and then 2 weeks after that. So if it's a 5-week month, it's probably not every 2 weeks, but we shoot for that. Some jobs happen a little more often. Some jobs happen not as often. The larger the job, the less likely that we're going to have a budget review every week. You know, if this is a 1-year house build, we don't need to talk every week. We probably don't even need to talk every other week. There'll be once a month before we invoice, and maybe at certain times when we go, okay, the window pricing changed before we order the windows. This is what the windows are going to be, and this is what they do to the budget. Even if we just had a conversation last week, we just want to make sure. Also, I said something there that's super important. The budget review comes before I invoice. I'm not ever going to send an invoice to a client and say, hey, you owe me this much, and then wait for them to say, hey, weren't we going to have a budget review? Can we do that before we pay this? No, I want them to be informed. So we're going to say, here's where we are, here's where we stand, here's where we're over budget or under budget, here's where the change orders put us outside of original budget, those sorts of things. And then also here's what you owe. And I think that's a good rule of thumb for invoicing. You should always contact the client before you take care of the invoice, obviously. So size of job, what's going on in the job, that affects it. But a good rule of thumb that we go by is every other week, every couple weeks. But the whole idea of scheduling the budget reviews is, again, just to up the communication and eliminate surprises. And then our number 3 is post-construction reviews. And it starts with sometimes it's me, sometimes it's myself and a project manager. What did we F up? What did we miss? We had a recent project that we didn't review the numbers with the concrete guy before we pulled the trigger, and we were substantially over budget on concrete, like 30%, which is huge, and it was a horrible error. Part of it was we had a major price increase in mud, and part of it is that we had, or concrete, sorry, and we had a major price increase in our concrete guys cost, and we didn't catch that we were on his old pricing with the old material pricing. And so we have to go to the clients, talk to them about that. Our contract technically protects us to just go, yeah, that's your cost, but that's not the best way to do business. So we have to find other means for resolving things in that instance. But that sucks. But when we finish that job, our what did we F up budget review in-house will be, okay, what is the timeline that we need to make changes so that we know that these price increases that are happening all the time are going to be locked in, so that we don't have to worry about the price changing. And we don't know what that is yet. I just know that it's on the horizon for something we're going to talk about. So, and then what do we change moving forward? So what did we screw up? What do we need to change? And if you're not doing that in your business as a whole, whatever your business is, what did we mess up? What do we need to change? How are we going to change it? Sorry. If you're not doing those two things, then you're going to continually make the same mistakes, and making the same mistakes over and over again is way more painful than making new mistakes that are lesser and learning from your mistakes and changing your habits or your methods. So those are big things that will move forward in the industry for how client relations go with you, whether or not clients hire you back. I'm talking to 2 clients right now that we finished houses for in the last 5 years. Both of those houses endured some fairly serious site conditions or economic conditions like COVID that pushed those budgets for those quite expensive houses over budget by almost 10%. They were extraordinary cases. That sort of thing doesn't normally happen. But because those clients were informed about what was going on in the process, informed about their budget, because we didn't allow them to absolutely max their house budget for what we were building. We were conservative with our estimating and said, we don't want you to say you can spend X and budget for X. We want you to budget, 10 to 15% less than X. We want you to have money left over at the end of this, even if there's problems. Those clients, I'm talking to 2 different clients right now. We're talking to them about doing new projects for them at those houses that are substantial money products. So you would think, oh, you had a house and it went 10% over budget. Man, those people probably never hire you back. No, we were able to let the clients understand what was going on, justify what was going on. They were informed early in the process and can make decisions based off of that. They know they can trust us. They know that we have command of our project, so they're hiring us back. So there's your lesson. Do a good job with budget reviews, and it can make a difference on your retainage of clients and on your business bottom line. So that's that. You got to do a budget review. You got to have command. If you're not, you got to stop. You stop operating the way you are now and do it. And if something scares you, lean into it and resolve it, because if it scares you, there's probably a reason that scares you, and there shouldn't be anything in our business that scares you. Have command. Thanks for watching today. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. There are multiple emails a week letting you know everything that's going on. I'm incredibly excited about the content that's coming out. I'm excited about the stuff that we have coming up. Don't forget to follow me and Steve Basic and Peter Yost on the Unbuild It podcast. Until next time, thanks for watching.